Looking back on all the notes that I've taken during medical school and coming to now being a doctor for the last 4 years, I think that if I was to say that there was one note-taking software that's really good, probably Notion is the best out of all of them. I'd been someone that had been writing Word documents to start off with and just keeping those in my Dropbox. And then when I went to clinical years, I used Evernote for a long time. But there's a few reasons why Notion, I think, is the best for medical school. And I think that rather than trying to explain every single reason why in theory, I'll just show you the reason and it'll be quicker. So if you let's say that I'm trying to do this thing on pediatric fractures. So luckily in medical school, you often get curriculums of stuff that you know you're supposed to learn, whether that's lectures that you're going to learn and you have the lectures for the semester, or sometimes they'll give you a curriculum full of the medical conditions that you're meant to know. So I think the single best function of Notion is that you have the thing called toggle lists. And so toggle lists is just if I type the greater than sign and then press space, then it immediately starts with a toggle list there. And then you can type in whatever the headline of your topic is. So in this particular case, I'm doing pediatric fractures. And so I have created my heading there. You just type / to do a bunch of stuff, and you can do /heading, or you can do /page or /link or whatever it is. But in my particular case, I might have the heading, which is going to be, pediatric fractures. And then if I was to sort of be a bit of a pleb, I could type out the individual headlines there and just sort of go one by one, etc, 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 until you get it done. But Notion has this nice little thing where it doesn't care about formatting too much, and so you can actually take a shortcut by literally grabbing all of this and then copy and pasting it down. And so then you've already got your list, and that's really helpful if you've got a list of stuff that you can just copy and paste. Furthermore, I'm going to use a shortcut to turn these all into totals, because you can see that they start off as just bullet points. So if I use Option Command 7, immediately they've all become sort of headlines, and so now these headlines are things that can be expanded, and kind of conveniently they've included the links to everything. So because the most effective learning technique is basically a thing called active recall, where you don't, we often get tempted to just read stuff, and if we have a textbook, we might read a page, and then about 10 minutes later after we read the page, we're like, okay, what did I actually learn? So actually the better way to think about things is to do this active recall method, where you ask yourself questions and then you try to answer those questions, but your note-taking would also reflect that method of learning. So let's say that, for example, I'm going to clavicle now. I don't know much about clavicles and pediatric fracture guidelines, so I'm going to be learning this pretty much for the first time. And so I'll just go to the clavicle section, see that it's already got a bunch of things, and I could, if I wanted to, I could even just copy and paste that and then do the same thing with Command 7, and then immediately I have a whole bunch of things that are already there, a bunch of questions that are already there for me to think about. So for example, how are clavicle fractures classified? Now I haven't studied this before, but I'd assume they'd be classified into whether they're outer, middle, or lower, or medial, third, and then the location actually makes a difference as to what is going on with that particular fracture. So let's have a look to see if that's true or not. And surely enough, we're right. So actually that's really convenient. So that's the case for adult fractures. So I assumed it was the same case for these sorts of fractures as well. So now I could just keep this there and be satisfied with that and just have this page handy and look back at it any time. If I wanted to include a link to the page, I might just copy and paste that here and just create a bookmark. Or since I've already got this thing, what I've done is I've actually remapped. So MacBooks, and I'm pretty sure Windows as well, actually has a screenshot tool. So you're able to very, very quickly take screenshots of pictures, and because of the way that Notion cleverly handles the pictures, it's actually really quick to make notes, because all you have to do is copy and paste, basically. And that's going to save you a lot of time typing down stuff. And I've talked about this a little bit in another video that I have sort of a few weeks ago called Making Study Notes Really Fast as a Doctor, but it's a very, very similar idea. So if I was to, in my case, press Control F, then I can activate that screenshot tool, and then in that toggle list I can very, very simply paste that there. So I don't have to waste a lot of time essentially taking notes by writing tables and stuff like that. Just quickly smack it in there, and then it's ready to go. So that I spend more time learning and less time actually writing the physical note. So I could do that for each individual question as we go along. So in terms of the, you can also obviously, add more things to tools. For example, what's the frequency of each individual clavicle fracture type might be a question I'll put into the toggle, and then when I see that question, I'll be like, oh, okay, I think that it's 80% for the middle, and then roughly half for the other 2 for the remaining. And so that's sort of right. And then what I tend to do is if I don't really, if I've just learned it for the first time and don't really know it, but now I understand it at least, I'll chuck it as red, and then that means that I'll have to make sure to come back to that and try to revise it again. If you're combining this sort of method with the spaced repetition thing, there's 2 ways you can do it. One is that you can do what I do and sort of sporadically, or not semi-sporadically, do the spaced repetition where you just look at your physical notes and stuff and then be like, oh, this is red, I better study it. This is not red, I'm fine with this. So for example, in here, this is my running list of stuff, because I think that when you get to later stages of medicine, often teaching is not as structured and can be a bit more sporadic. So when that happens, then you don't necessarily always have the time to be able to go back and structure it properly. Not like in medical school where you have a lot of time to sort of do that. But if you're learning stuff on the spot, like for example, I've learned celiac disease the other day, and I really want to look at those notes. So I would be like, okay, well, I've highlighted this red, it's obviously important because I've not only highlighted, I've bolded and put 3 stars, so it's really important to know. And then even then you can see that I put in individual questions there. So, for example, what are clinical manifestations? Manifestations of celiac disease, list 6. So if I was to try to guess them, and I studied them before, it'd be stuff like diarrhea, weight loss potentially, lethargy, and you can get some extra intestinal manifestations as well, like dermatitis herpetiformis. Sometimes people present with anemia. And so if I go into there, then I can see, I get a few of these sort of things, right? Like the diarrhea one, right? But actually there's more GI symptoms and nausea and constipation. And I sort of said lethargy there, I said dermatitis herpetiformis. And so that's, I sort of have copy and pasted this from somewhere else. Then with these other things, these are also copy and pasted. So it's very quickly, because frankly in medicine you just have to study a lot of material, and it's very, very easy to fall into the trap of spending heaps of time writing notes when really everyone has already written the notes for you, and usually they've spent a lot of time thinking about it, writing it well. There is one sort of caveat to that, which is where if you're studying medicine in the very early years of medicine, I think that trying to understand stuff in terms of how everything connects is really, really important. I still think Notion is a really good way to do that with the active recall thing. You can actually make individual pages if you wanted to. So let's say that I had never studied anything about the gut before, and I was really trying to understand how it works from start to finish, right? So you can just create a separate page for that, and then creating a separate page about, GI physiology, very straightforward, and then you can, include your little bits and pieces like nervous supply, arterial supply, whatever it is. I'm not going to do it now, obviously, but this is just as an example of what it physically looks like when you create a new page in Notion, and then when you go back, that page is something that is just there for you to use. So actually, when you think about it, even if you were to try to write in prose, actually still Notion is the best. So actually, never mind. I was thinking that Microsoft Word might be better for that aspect of things, but it's not. I think that then the comparison becomes whether you use Evernote versus Notion. And my personal opinion is that Evernote is good for one particular thing, which is that it's easily searchable. Notion, you can search, and if you were to try to search stuff, I'll show you what that looks like here. So if I was to search like this medical knowledge graph, and let's say I was trying to search stuff on HIV, then I would go there, type HIV, and it would come up with a few results and with all the sentences and stuff like that. And that's okay, but I think that, you know, a lot of these things are sort of repeats, and they're all in the same section and stuff like that. So with Evernote, if you were to try to do the same thing, and let's go to that, and say I've got this here, and say I was searching for asthma, the way that the search function would come up is that, because I know I've written about asthma a whole bunch of times, as you can see throughout the years. And so then, you know, it might be a bit easier, because this list is so condensed, to be actually able to go back and look at that sort of stuff. And it's a bit easier on mobile as well, to be honest, compared to Notion, which I don't think is the funnest to use on mobile. But anyway, as you can see, there is one big problem with Evernote, which is why Notion is a bit better, which is that how many times have I written this freaking asthma note? There's been so many times that, like, I studied asthma and, like, you know, all sort of different iterations of it. But it would have been so much neater to have just done it once and learnt it once and then kept it once in a particular place and then iterate on that particular note rather than going back several times over it. I mean, technically, I suppose that if you are going back several times over a particular condition, over time, your understanding of that condition will start from a very broad, very basic point of view and then get refined into the details. And that might be a benefit of rewriting notes like that. So for example, the understanding of asthma now, like talking about it as an IgE mediated thing of ATP, you know, that related to ATP, that sort of concept is very easy to say like in one sentence, but if you don't know anything about like how IgE mediation works in the first place, well, you might like have included that in your first edition of the note. Whereas now that I've been studying doing medicine for 9 years, well, I don't think I need to re-explain that to myself, and so I'd rather just be like, oh yeah, like it's a IgE mediated reaction, I'll like know exactly what that is, and then my actual note itself will be a lot more condensed when I go to write the note that I would use practically these days, which would be focused on, you know, how do you manage chronic asthma, or like how do you deal with exacerbations of asthma, or you know, grade the severity of it and that sort of thing. So I think over time, your understanding of a particular medical condition or a particular medical concept will evolve. It won't necessarily just say it's this static thing where everything is super basic, and then you know, having too much basic stuff can often make you see the trees when you should be looking at the forest, and then that would probably be the one reason why you might consider something like Evernote if you like to rewrite notes constantly. But again, I think that's a small point. I really think that Notion is the best. So anyway, I've been rambling on a little while about that, but the Notion search function is not the absolute best. And if I was to go back to my peds, go back to this thing. So let me just again show you what I would do. So now I've got this particular note. I've gone back to how they classified and stuff. So now I know it's like in thirds, as I guessed. How common are they and how do they occur? They're probably, like, trying to guess the answer to this, I would say that they're relatively common. I don't know, like, percentage-wise how common they are. And how do they occur? Probably they would occur by either direct trauma and possibly by falling on an outstretched hand and maybe causing that. That would be my guess. Looking at it here, it says it's one of the most common. Okay, so it's actually not just relatively common, it's one of the most common. It's associated with birth trauma. Oh yeah, that's interesting. And they heal quickly. And as I sort of said about the outstretched hand before, that can happen. So I'll be like, okay, like I sort of had a good guess, but it's still worthwhile. You know, you can either do this thing of copy and pasting the note in there, which is fine, or if you want to, you can copy and paste the text, and that's just as easy because Notion is really good at formatting stuff for you, so you don't necessarily have to worry about how it's going to appear when you put it in your notes. And then I guess the other benefit of having a copy and pasted text for the note is that you can obviously edit that and, you know, bold that or whatever. So yeah, I suppose the last thing I would talk about that would be a bit relevant is that the table functions in Notion are pretty good. So if I just quickly, like, let's say that I was someone that loved to have tables. I don't, but actually, sorry, before I talk about that, I'll just say that you can actually write a table of contents here, and then it will take all the headlines that you've got in your note and then chuck it as like an individual table of contents thing there. So I'll show you another example with my women's health stuff, which is a good example. So like, this is my women's health thing, and this is just a table of contents that updates itself. And every time I add a new headline by like literally typing /1 to get the heading 1, and then type headline, headline, then this will update automatically. So that's really cool, and it will save you time too. And it also gives you a bigger overview of what's going on. So anyway, and also each of these is individually linked too. So let's say that I wanted to look at menstrual issues, I'll just click on that, and as you can see, my notes are pretty much you know, all in toggle lists, like menorrhagia, what's the history of it, that I should be asking, well, it's this stuff, and then I'll go back and be like, oh, like, you know, I probably should try to memorize that properly at some stage. So that's what the table of contents, the sort of main way I take notes is. It's almost like writing a book, really, but it's Notion has got a lot of things that allow you to organize it automatically for you, and I think it's like very neat, and it's very like, it's quick to use, it's responsive, as you can see. Like, you know, copy and pasting stuff is really quick, and I think it's just like, to be honest, it's just like a pleasure to use. And I think that with studying, if your studying is enjoyable, you're going to do a lot more of it. But if your study is like a pain, then you won't. So I don't know if that's a revelation, but anyway. So I guess the last thing I wanted to talk about in this particular video was that with Notion, you can do these tables, which are really, really awesome too. And I'll just quickly show you that, because some people might like to structure notes that way. And there's a really good YouTuber who doesn't have a lot of subscribers. He's a surgeon in Australia. Go subscribe to his thing. His name is Chris something or another, but he's got really good content too. But he likes to organize things in tables. So, you know, you would just type /table, and I'm just going to create a full page table as an example, and just say that I was, let's say that I was doing the pediatric fracture thing in a different sort of format, but I wanted it to be a bit neater. So again, I might, you know, start typing clavicle and what else have I got there? Clavicle, proximal humerus, oops, and blah de blah de blah. I could also probably copy and paste it. Let's give it a shot. I'm curious as to actually whether this will work or not. So it doesn't. Okay, so you have to type this one manually if you're doing that. But then, like, what the really interesting thing about tables is that each of these individual records can be opened up as a separate page. And so what I mean by that is that, let's say that I wanted to open this. Oh, let's say that I wanted to open this up as a clavicle page. So, and in the clavicle page, I can actually enter individual details about it, and then, you know, I might literally have this sort of similar idea of copy and pasting this and making this toggle list and stuff, except now it's become a cell in a table. And you can see that there's a little icon there which indicates that it's a separate page that you can open by itself. So the other thing I suppose that would be beneficial about tables is that you can make your own categories and stuff like that. So let's say I'm just going to delete these two. Give me one sec. And say that I'm going to add a new column there, and I'm just going to create what's called a single select, if I can find it. Yeah, it's a select. And so I might be like, you have I studied this or not? So I'll be like, studied, question mark. And then if I haven't, I'll literally just type not studied. And if I have, maybe I'll type studied for this one. And then I'll type not studied for this one, and then not studied, and it helps you like autocomplete and stuff like that. And let's say that I was gonna just do a few more. So give me a sec as I remember what limbs we have in the body. So I'll be like, okay, this one's studied, this one's not studied, not studied, and studied, as an example, right? So the really cool thing about tables is that they have this powerful filter function. So like, let's say that I just wanted to have a list of the stuff that I haven't studied yet. Well, I could easily go to the filter and then go to add a filter. And then it gives you this little thing where you can define what you want to see or what you don't want to see. So for example, if I want to say, okay, where the ones that I've studied is the stuff that I've not studied before, like in that category, then it will just show me the ones I've not studied. And that's actually going to be really useful if you're like, okay, well, I need to figure out and sort of consolidate which ones I haven't studied, sort of thing. I personally don't use a table, but I can see that there would be a huge benefit from doing so. Similarly, you can also use the sort function and stuff like that. And I suppose one last thing that I'll mention, because this video is, two last things I'll mention because this video is getting a bit long now, is that you can use templates. So let's say that, because you know that, let me just get rid of this for a second. Okay, so you know that like a lot of the stuff that you have is going to have a similar headlines and stuff like that, right? So what if you had a way to make a template? Well, actually Notion allows you to do that really well by creating a template by clicking new template. And then let's say I'm going to call this condition template. And then I'm going to have the headlines, so for example, epidemiology here, and then I'll have clinical manifestations, and I'll have like treatment as an example. Oops, sorry. Treatment. And then if you want to make it more complex, you might be like, okay, well, what's the history and what's the examination findings of that particular thing, right? And so if you've got something like that there, and this is just a template, right? So I've created that template now, and it's automatically saved without me having to do anything. So if I just click back here, then what I can do is when I open a new page, so let's say that I open the proximal humerus page and talk about proximal humerus fractures. I open that as a new page, but you can immediately see that it's come up with this template thing that you can immediately choose. And so if you just click on that, then the template that you've just created, it will create a whole bunch of stuff for you like that. That's really satisfying actually, that got well timed for this speech. So you can see that that's really powerful, and that might save you a bit of time, especially if you'd like to structure your notes in a very, very particular way. So that is everything, and that's like, I think that everything, those main functions are the reasons why you would use Notion. As you can see, you can organize each of your different specialties into different pages, and those pages can contain stuff, essentially. And then you can choose to do that in a table form or not, up to you. And then okay, one last thing, which is that you don't have to stick to this table view. If you're wanting a more visual way to look at your progress, actually Notion has a bunch of different other views that you can use. So for example, they have a Kanban board and they have calendars and stuff like that. So if, let's say that I was going to the Kanban board, because I think that that's probably the most practical one, I would just say it's Kanban, which comes from the Japanese word or phrase Kanban or something. And then immediately you can sort of see that you've got these bunch of lists, and these lists are going to be draggable. So you can see that I haven't studied these for, and I've studied these for. Let's say that I studied the proximal humerus today. Well, I can satisfyingly just take that and drop that there. And so I can be like, okay, this is my pile of stuff that I need to do, and this is my pile of stuff that I did but maybe haven't revised. And then if I want to add another stuff of things to revise, then I can be like, okay, now I will drag that here instead. I'll revise the hand and elbow, and yeah, so it gives you a very, very clear idea, not only as to what you're taking notes of, which is the problem with perhaps Evernote and Microsoft Word documents just chucked into a folder, but you can actually get a very, very clear picture of what your actual progress is, where you need to focus on, and even what you might need to focus more on. So let's say that that I haven't really grasped particular topics. Let's say that I know a lot about the clavicle, but I don't know much about the wrist. So with this, I can be like very, very quickly, oh, like, you know, these ones are hard, these ones are easy, this one's are hard, this one's are easy, so this is where I need to focus more on. You know, you can use this single select for anything, and, you know, use importance for it. If you wanted to, you know, create tags, you can do that with like a multi-select, for example. So let's say that clavicle is in a limb, but also I want to include it in the fractures category, and that is something which is really effective if you're trying to sort stuff, filter stuff, because then you can be like, okay, well, like this one on clavicle has got the fracture, but this one proximal humerus doesn't have the fracture thing, because I just didn't put it there for explanation purposes. And then you'd be like, okay, I'm going to filter to include just things that have fractures. Where number is fractures, and so you can see that that's there just by itself, and it doesn't include the other one that I put as upper limb but not fracture. So tables are really powerful, pages are really powerful, templates are really powerful. Notion itself is just really good. You thought I was going to say powerful, but I said good. Sorry, that was lame. So yeah, that's why I think that Notion for medical students, really, really good note-taking software. I'll just give you a quick look as to what my Evernote notes look like. So this is sort of going to illustrate, what the heck? This is going to illustrate why I think that Notion is better than Evernote, for example, because you can see in Evernote it doesn't have toggle listing. So I've just literally got a huge amount of prose there, and you have to scroll, and I don't really have a good idea as to, you know, where everything sits in relation to each other. I think Evernote does have a benefit in that it's really easy to take notes, and that it has a very opinionated way it wants you to display your notes. I think Evernote, again, as I mentioned, the searchability thing is probably one of the better aspects of it too compared to Notion. But generally speaking, Evernote, and the tagging system is pretty good if you're using it correctly, although I've never sort of grasped the full power of the tagging system. I hope that this tutorial / ramble has been really useful for you, and if you do end up using Notion because of it, then hooray! If you like this particular video, I can make more notes on Notion. I think there's a few more things that I want to talk about with Notion, in particular something about how you can use Notion and Anki together, which is really interesting, to get that ultimate, like, brain hacks, spaced repetition, active recall together at the same time. But this video is already getting long enough. I'll talk about that in another video. And I suppose, closing words, as a medical student, learning stuff, when you start your first years of medical school, you're really just learning a lot of different concepts and trying to get the mental models in your brain for the first time. If you look at the individual notes that I had when I was a medical student, let me just see if I can find. So looking back at my past notes, if you look at these notes, which are kind of intense. Oh no, I don't want to delete my note. Spent a lot of work on that. Like you can see that my individual notes used to have heaps of like pictures and lots of text and a lot of prose and stuff like that, which is kind of nice because it's kind of like I wrote a book in the past sort of thing. But you know, I think with that, I still think that Notion is going to be better, to be honest. So yeah, so here's some sort of more notes about stuff that I did in the past, and I think that it has its own little satisfaction for having a bunch of files like that. Certainly, passing files to other medical students is kind of like, you know, it's almost like trading things on the black market. It's like, do you want my notes? Yeah, I'll take your notes too. Yeah. So it's kind of like you can build up some leverage like that, I suppose. But yeah, anyway, that's it. So if you like this video, leave something nice that I can know that this has helped someone, because each little comment gives me a little boost of support. Otherwise, have a nice day. I'll catch you later.